Watchers in the Fourth Dimension.
My medical attendants assure me that my termination is proceeding normally.
Private deal from a group of Foamasi citizens. His scarf killed Stimson. Arrest the scarf then.
Hello and welcome back to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension. I'm Anthony.
I'm Diana.
I'm Julie.
And I'm Riley, and I am the child of the generator.
This episode, it's all change. For those of you that listened to our little announcement minisode, you'll have already heard that we have welcomed Diana on board the show full time. And if you didn't listen to that, go and do it to hear Diana introduce herself. Anyway, this episode, we're heading into the 80s proper as we kick off season 18 with the Leisure Hive. But before we get onto that, Riley's going to take a look at the mail.
Thanks, Anthony. We will be covering our mail for the Horns of Nimon.
Oh boy.
First up is Citrine Dragonfly, who said, I would love it if you all did an MST3K treatment of Horns of Nimon. Cue it up with the episode and listen along. I'm so excited that you're doing Shada. I can't wait to hear how you choose to watch and what you all think. Well, you're going to have to wait for that. As for the MST3K thing, I'm not against it.
We'll have to get all four of us in the same states first, but I'm open to it if we can do that.
The 12th Rising says, I rather like the Horns of Nimon and place it third in the season of my favorite stories from season 17 after City of Death and Destiny of the Daleks. I remember seeing a review once which said that as this was broadcast over the Christmas-New Year period of 1979/1980, it should be treated as a pantomime, which is a really good way to view it. Yes, there's some dreadful acting, bad sets and special effects, and Tom Baker is at his most comedic and over the top here, but there are some aspects of the story to admire. The story does have ambition. The sets within the power complex and on Krynoth, I can't remember if it's Krynoth or not.
Krynoth
Are excellent, but the standout aspect of the story is Lala Ward as Romana. She puts in a delightful and assured performance. The Doctor is confined to the TARDIS in the power complex at certain points in the story, and it's Romana who stands up to Soldeed, our boy Soldeed, when she arrives on Skanos with the prisoners. She leads them through the Nimon maze into the power complex and tries to reassure them and stand up to the Nimon, and she ends up on Krynoth. In many ways, she is the Doctor in the story, and the Doctor is her companion.
Yep.
Peter Beatnik says, I am so sorry for your loss of time on this earth, which you sacrificed in order to watch this mess. Worst of the season, worst of Tom Baker, worst of the 70s, and top 5 most painful to watch. I must scour my eyeballs and watch something less painful as a palate cleanser, like Manos the Hands of Fate. 2 out of 10 over-the-top villains, and that is being overly generous.
Wow, tell me how you really feel.
Beardo always comes in with that kind of stuff.
And then we have someone that I'm unfamiliar with that wrote in called The Doctor's Beard, whose comment was, Lord Nimon, it is I, Soldeed.
Oh, that's so good.
Every time Alex, one of these days I'm going to get it. I promise, Alex Kafetsoglu,
I believe.
Kafetsoglu. I will get it one day, Alex, I swear. It may be when we're on New Who, but I promise I will get there. First time I watched The Horns of Nimon, I got a headache. I don't know whether you could just call it nostalgia, but after watching it this time, I also got a headache. Maybe I'm just, quote, weakling scum.
You said it, Alex, not us.
J. David Holt says, is this a good story? No. Do I really enjoy it? Absolutely. Graham Crowden's performance as Soldeed is historic, for better or for worse, and it makes this whole story worth it to me. Romana gets some great moments, but everything else is below average. The story works really well if you think of it as a farce rather than a well-constructed piece of television. Overall, it's bad, but I don't think it's deserving of ranking among the worst ever. 4 horny bulls out of 10. David Gorton says, quite appropriate that this was broadcast in December and January, as this was most definitely Doctor Who does Panto. In fact, back in the day, I know someone who dubbed a Panto soundtrack onto it, complete with booze, and the, quote, it's behind you, and the, oh no, it isn't, and so on. I mean, Doctor Who does Panto isn't an intrinsically bad idea, but this is Doctor Who does Panto badly. Interestingly, here the plural for Naimon is clearly Naimons, stated several times, yet when Big Finish uses the characters, they use Naimon as a plural as well as a singular. Parentheses, yes, that's what passes as interesting here. A generous 2 lumps of Jasonite out of 10. And I noticed throughout the mail, a lot of people commented about it being a pantomime. A lot of people did that. It hit a lot of people. Kieran James Evans says, look, is it good? No. Do I have fun watching it? Yes. It's definitely the Christmas panto. Here we are again. And Graham Crowden needs to go on a scenery-free diet. And here's the plural again. 5 Naimon that I have seen today out of 10. Nicholas Rutherford says, I like this well enough as a 12-year-old to write a short story based on it in my English lessons. I would love to read that story. Now, it's my least favorite of the season. Yes, I even prefer Creature from the Pit, but I don't dislike it. Give me this over Invasion of Time or Armageddon Factor any day. That's the strongest defense we've heard so far for the Horns of Naimon out of this mail. Nathan Law says, I have very mixed feelings that this is my Doctor Who birth sign, since I was born between episodes 3 and 4 of this one. Some may say that explains a lot. I'm not so sure that a use of the term space pirates can always be counted as a reference to the Doctor Who story of the same name. It's a pretty generic term in science fiction. I don't have much else other than to echo Anthony's assertion that Big Finish uses the Naimon far better than they are used here. Here's hoping that you guys enjoy the fantastic synth music of Season 18, which I know we will get into when we get into the story. Philip Cully says, well, if you don't like Jasonite, you could continue the Greek myths line and go for Argonite, which gives you another Space Pirates reference. I'd completely forgotten about that. I love Naimon. It's a fun story to not take seriously and just enjoy Soldeed. Then again, I love season 17, so maybe it's just me. Plus, it was rare in being broadcast over Christmas rather than taking a few weeks off, so you can just consider it, guess what? It is the Doctor Who 1979 Christmas pantomime. There it is again. Everyone talked about it. And also, he says, finally, this is special to me as it's the Doctor Who story broadcast closest to my birth date. I was born almost exactly halfway between Naimon and Leisure Hive, but thankfully Naimon, which is kind of scary that he seems to prefer Naimon over Leisure Hive. But no, just 2 birthday boys back to back, Philip and Nathan there. Happy birthday, guys. Well, whenever those aired, but not now. We're in podcast land where time means nothing. John Thomas Casey says, oh, it's really bad. Might be more watchable than Creature from the Pit. You all had great fun with this, and I had an amazing time listening, so many laughs. Anthony definitely has to do the Soldeed costume now. It just has to happen. I expect pics. We're working on it, John Thomas Casey. We're working on it. Pour one out for Dutters indeed. Sad to see him go, but not that sad to say goodbye to the awful season of 17 canine voice. I am a little worried about how the music will go down starting next season. Riley was complaining about the Sith this time, and well, not exactly a spoiler. Well, it isn't now since we've seen it. I'm afraid it's pretty much since all the way through the 80s. My earliest memories of Doctor Who all have to do with that 80s synth music sound, particularly seasons 18 through 20. Not all of it worked, but some of it was really cool. Getting ahead of myself a bit here, but I really like that we are using a variety of composers going forward. Even though a lot of the patches used may have been the same, it adds a nice variety to the soundscape in the coming years. I have a feeling we'll be talking about the music a lot when we discuss the Leisure Hive. Good old friend R.L. Gray says, Watchers, I was delighted hearing you get more and more angry and exasperated as he talked about this story. Sometimes the worst Doctor Who is the most fun Doctor Who, and that is true. On that note, referencing, I think, Julie's suggestion to do a rewatch with MST3K style riffing, if you're down for recording watch-alongs in the riff track style, I am so in. Regarding the tone of this story, Peter Haining, who I looked up is a British journalist, suggests the campiness and humor were amped up to, guess what? Give it a pantomime feel, as it was airing during the holiday season. I'm telling you, everyone was just obsessed with that aspect of it. Anthony, your soul deed sounds a little like Borat. Wow.
Oh, no.
Wow.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. And then this is amazing. He calls me out and says, Riley, I've made an effort at the poster you requested. Let me know what you think, weakling scum. And I have it, and it is exactly what I imagined. It is, and of course, describing something on an audio podcast is just ridiculous, but I'll do my best. It's the quote of the Naimon with a picture of the Naimon. Quote, there can be no stumbling in the great journey of life. And then below him, it says, motivation, pass it on. I love that. That is fantastic. Thank you. That was very funny. Exactly how I imagined it.
We'll put that on our social media, so dear listener, you can see it.
He goes on to say, I love hearing you all have fun with a story, particularly the ones where you're just totally done with it about halfway through. The serial isn't great, but it's enjoyable for the cheapest and campiest of reasons. I mean, I'd much rather watch it than Armageddon Factor any day. It's 4 meddlesome hussies out of 10 for me. And to wrap up, and as I said before, it's difficult to describe something visually. Our friend Danglebert Zebulon did not write anything. He just replied with a GIF, and is the GIF from The Office of Michael Scott screaming, no, 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 oh God, no, repeatedly. So that's where he stands in regards to the Horns of Daimon. And with that, that's the mail.
Thank you for that, Riley. And as a reminder to our listeners, we really do love getting your feedback, thoughts, comments, and questions. And as you've just heard, once again, we do try and read out as many as possible on the show. So please do get in touch. You can contact us through Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Watchers4D, or you can email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. Additionally, we would absolutely love it if you subscribe to the podcast if you're not doing so already, and if you dropped us a review or rating on your podcast platform of choice. All of those things really do help us out. Heading behind the scenes on the Leisure Hive, there is a lot of change here, so there's going to be a lot in this segment. Again, this isn't your bag. Skip forward 10-15 minutes. Much like his predecessor, Graham Williams, new producer John Nathan Turner was very keen to attract new writing talent for season 18, and unlike his predecessor, he was also very keen to attract new directorial talent. He and executive producer Barry Letts also wanted to focus the show more on legitimate science and less on fantasy and overt humor. Unfortunately, they did not inherit any scripts that fit this new direction. With no script editor yet in place, Nathan Turner turned to a familiar name to script the first serial in this brave new Who, David Fisher. Fisher, of course, had previously written The Stones of Blood and the Androids of Tara from season 16 and The Creature from the Pit from season 17. He had also written a set of scripts that previous script editor Douglas Adams rewrote to become the legendary City of Death. More recently, Fisher had been discussing an idea called The Psychonauts with Adams and had offered Nathan Turner a storyline entitled The Castle of Doom. Nathan Turner, on the other hand, quite liked an idea of Fisher's called The Argolin that Adams had previously rejected in early 1979. Which was set in a futuristic holiday camp. With Letts' help, Nathan Turner reworked Fisher's original proposal and returned it to the writer to flesh out into full scripts, and these were commissioned under the title of Avalon in late December 1979. Initially, Fisher sought to maintain some of the same comedy that he had included in his previous Doctor Who serials. He envisioned Avalon as a pastiche of gangster films, and even came up with the name of the Foamasi as an anagram of mafiosa. However, more and more of his humor was removed during the story's development. Fortunately for him, he had done some research into tachyonics via The New Scientist, and so he could supply the desired elements of hard science. During the scripting process, new script editor Christopher H. Bidmead came on board the show. Bidmead shared Nathan Turner and Letts' idea of a more serious Doctor Who. This was his first and only job as script editor, and he had previously been an actor appearing in Emergency Ward 10 and Crime of Passion. Then he moved into writing, working on Harriet's Back in Town and Rooms. And no, I haven't heard of either of those either. The opening scene of Avalon was set on the beach at Brighton in East Sussex at the request of Nathan Turner, who lived nearby. This gave the opportunity for the production team to put K9 out of action for the serial, as nobody on the new production team particularly liked K9. Wow. The robotic dog's departure was already planned for later in the season, and Nathan Turner was keen to reduce his role as much as possible to get audiences used to the idea of him not being around. Nathan Turner also thought that the unexpected near destruction of most people's favorite pooch would be a good shock to hook viewers into the new season. As he took over, Nathan Turner also felt that the show was in need of a significant visual overhaul, and we're going to talk about this a lot when we get into it. He believed there was a lot of money to be made if the show was branded properly, so he decided that it was time to implement several changes. This began with the title sequence. The previous version had been in use since season 11 in 1973, with only minor changes being made with the changeover in Doctor from Pertwee to Baker. Nathan Turner tasked Sid Sutton of the BBC graphics department with a complete redesign. Up until this point, the Doctor Who titles had generally been disorienting and claustrophobic, so Sutton introduced a starscape animation to provide a significant contrast. He also devised a new logo, which was styled in the manner of neon tubes. Nathan Turner also thought the Doctor Who characters would be more marketable if their costumes were consistent from story to story, more like a uniform, something that would also save them money. Although Lalla Ward playing Romana was insistent that she continue to have a substantial say in how her character was dressed. Nathan Turner asked June Hudson, the designer assigned to Avalon, to come up with a new outfit for the Doctor. Baker mooted the possibility of something completely different, but Hudson ultimately maintained the same basic design, including the iconic scarf, with the only major change being to the colour palette. Question marks were also added to the Doctor's shirt collar at Nathan Turner's request. I guess to make the Doctor more mysterious, because that's how you do that? I don't know.
I didn't even notice.
Likewise, Nathan Turner felt that it was time for a change in the show's soundscape. Up to this point, the score for each Doctor Who episode had typically been performed by small ensembles. Freelancer Dudley Simpson had been the composer most often employed for the program in the 1970s, but early in 1980, Nathan Turner took Dudders out to lunch to explain that he was going with a new approach.
You know, he had the decency to do that with Dudders, and that makes me happy.
Yes.
For a second there, I thought you said, and then he was about to take Dudders out. I'm like the mafia? What are you talking about?
In fitting with the story, right?
Right.
So Simpson's 15-year association with Doctor Who came to an end, and members of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop would now compose the electronic incidental music. Peter Howell was the Radiophonic Workshop member assigned to Avalon, and Nathan Turner also asked him to engineer a completely new arrangement of the Doctor Who theme music. The last time this was attempted was in 1972, when a previous attempt ended up being rejected at the very last minute. If anyone remembers that horrible version that sounded like it was on like a little Casio stylophone with rubber bands. Yeah, that one. In keeping with his desire to bring new directors onto Doctor Who, Nathan Turner secured the services of Lovett Bickford for Avalon. Having developed a reputation for achieving distinctive visuals, Bickford was eager to record the serial in the style of a feature film, complete with unusual camera angles, single camera takes, and the widespread use of a handheld camera. Joining Bickford, Hudson, and Howell on the behind-the-scenes team for the story, we have new production unit manager Angela Smith, who had previously worked as a director's assistant on Blake 7. As designer, we have the only contribution to the show of Tom Yardley-Jones, but his contribution was a significant one, as he is responsible for introducing the new TARDIS prop that would be used right up until the end of the classic era of the show in 1989. He's also notable for being the designer on The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and for anyone who says, you guys should do an episode on The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, we're going to.
Yes. Woo!
By the time filming began, the serial had obtained its final title of The Leisure Hive. Things were not well behind the scenes at the start of filming. Tom Baker was unwell following a long flight back from Australia, and his mood was further impacted by a downturn in his relationship with Lalla Ward. The pair had decided to end their romantic relationship when shooting ended on season 17 in December 1979. At this point, Baker wanted to get back together with Ward. She was less keen on that. And as a result, they weren't talking to each other. That being said, Tom had a much better working relationship with Nathan Turner than he had had with Williams, so he was a little more happy there, even if he was somewhat unenthusiastic about the changes being brought in. By the time studio shooting began in the first studio block, Bickford had obtained an extra day so he could experiment with the new Quantel image processing equipment, and this allowed for the TARDIS to be seen to materialize while the camera was moving, which was something they couldn't do before. However, Bickford's avant-garde approach had resulted in the Leisure Hive falling very much behind schedule. The second studio block, originally intended to span 3 days, now had to be extended as well to a 4th day to ensure that the necessary scenes would be captured. And even then, Bickford still had to schedule extra recording during the mornings and obtain permission for overruns in the evening. All of this added up to the Leisure Hive going substantially over budget, earning Nathan Turner a reprimand from his superiors on his first story as well, and ensuring that Bickford would never work on Doctor Who again. The Leisure Hive was also Fisher's final contribution to the show, and this was in no small part due to his unhappiness over the efforts of Nathan Turner, Bidmead, and Bickford, and their decision to augment the serial's pace by cutting a significant amount of Fisher's material, which they deemed to be superfluous. As a consequence, and I know Julie's going to say something about this later, all 4 episodes were running short, even with lengthy reprises grafted onto the last 3 parts. Season 18 launched with episode 1 of The Leisure Hive on August the 30th, 1980, and as usual ran on 4 consecutive Saturdays. Unfortunately, despite Nathan Turner's efforts to revamp the show, Doctor Who struggled to perform against ITV's glossy American import, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century.
Awesome!
Yeah.
Fewer than 6 million viewers tuned in for the season premiere, the smallest audience for a season debut since season 4 started with The Smugglers in 1966. Yeah, most of us don't even remember recording about that one. Exacerbating things, Doctor Who's audience declined over the course of The Leisure Hive. By episode 3, the programme had fallen out of the top 100 programmes for the week for the first time since its very first story, An Unearthly Child, way back in 1963. So before we discuss the story, the short summary is in the hands of Julie this episode. Over to you, Julie.
Hello, your travel agent here. I wanted to talk to you about a great deal for visiting the Leisure Hive. Now, I know, the history is bad. Was there a nuclear war fall on Argolin? Yes. Did it make 95% of the planet's surface uninhabitable to all but the most hardy of beings? Sure. But they really do have some interesting features. You may have thought the beehive hairdo was out of style, but the Argolins have it down to an art. And did you ever want to play squash? Well, here, you can play it while being weightless. Exciting stuff, I tell you. I should also say, don't believe all the gossip. Did they maybe arrest a doctor and accuse of a murder and not allow him a trial? Well, maybe. Do they have terrible security that allows for sabotage by old animes? Perhaps. But they do have a very excellent special right now. They can take the DNA from your entire party and provide you with clones. They even have a BOGO sale going on right now. I hope I can make this happen for you.
Amazing. Thank you, Julie. Well, let's talk about it. And before we actually get onto the story itself, let's start with the big elephant in the room. New title sequence, new logo, and new theme tune arrangement. For Diana, who's joining us at this point and has seen it before, this may not seem like such a surprise, but Riley and Julie, were you expecting that with this story?
No.
No, not at all. Not at all. I did not expect, when I press play, to be greeted with the opening of an instructional VHS on how to operate your new Commodore 64.
That is so on point.
But I'm not saying I didn't like it.
Yeah, so that's my next question. What do we all think of what we saw? Personally, I really like it. It's refreshing and it was time for a change.
Yes, I agree. It was refreshing. It has some parts that could have been a little bit sharper. I'm not a fan of the font that they use for the title for the episode. That looks poor. The flashing star effect, also not so great. But everything else, I'm fine with it. And it's like we discussed before, it is time for a change, and we'll see how this goes.
Okay, I was not expecting it. I like the musical changes more than I like the visual changes. But mostly because, as Riley pointed out, it just seemed a little bit messy. And I think if there was a little bit more tightening up on it, I think it would be a little bit better.
I didn't watch any of 4 before this episode so that it would come in fresh because I knew this season was different. But I'd forgotten that they had changed the intro, so I didn't even pick up on that this would have been the first of the new intro. But it's one that I like.
The only thing I don't like about it is the new logo. And that's really just because I think by the time we're looking at it, over 40 years later, the neon tube looks very, very dated. We are so clearly in the 80s, but I do like the new arrangement. And yeah, I actually quite like the title sequence beyond that. Well, let's talk about the Leisure Hive, and we kick off with part 1, and we have that 90-second long panning shot of Brighton Beach.
Holy crap.
Oh,
8 hours long, where most of it is just the doctor snoring. And when I tell you there's one sound I cannot deal with, it's snoring. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to watch this whole thing because I cannot get through. I was like, when does this panning shot stop? It's going to be the whole episode.
I definitely felt like I was starting to snore by the end of it.
And question, are beaches ever that empty?
When it's that windy and likely cold in England, yes.
Okay. I've never done it in the cold and not be a tourist and everyone being there, so could not comment. Okay.
Yeah, it looked, awful. I mean, not the shot, just that is a beach that I do not want to go to.
No.
Although I do have a question. If it's that windy, why did they set up all that stuff?
Don't ask difficult questions.
Yeah, is Brighton just set up year round?
I could tell that with how windy it was, and I was able to tell because of how long the painting shot was, because I had to look at something. The chairs were very clearly dug into the rock/sand beach so as to not blow over. It was very clear.
I want to talk about what happens after this long-ass panning shot.
You want to talk about K9?
When Romana tries to kill K9?
Well, yes, killing K9. But I swear that they have progressively made K9 dumber and dumber as Doctor Who goes on. It makes me very upset because even if he's given an instruction, he would say, "Isn't this a bad idea, Romana? Are you sure you want me to do this?" But no, he just blindly follows instructions. Seems a little off to me.
Well, to be fair, he is meant to have water defenses, and then Romana yells at the Doctor for getting them wrong. So as far as K9 is concerned, he's probably going to be okay.
But they've set up before that K9 knows when there's something wrong with him. Shouldn't he be able to be like, saltwater and me aren't going to go well together right now because things the Doctor did wrong?
Yeah.
In short, yes, but I'm trying to be kind.
No, don't do K9 dirty like that.
I think this might be what you're talking about in behind the scenes, and it's that no one liked K9 and the crew. So they wrote him poorly, sidelined him consistently. There you are. That's your answer.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense knowing that they were trying to set up the removal of K9 from the show.
It was sabotage.
Bright side, though, we do have John Leeson back.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we have his proper voice. They persuaded him to come back under the understanding that K9 was going to be written out.
That he's only going to have 4 lines.
Effectively.
Guess what? You're hired. But you're going to be fired real soon.
All right, I have another question. I know we had 2 seasons ago, the Black Guardian, the White Guardian, all that other stuff. It feels like they decided to leave very heavy into that again after last season only briefly mentioning it. That felt weird to me.
Yeah, and it's really, I think, just because at the end of the story we get rid of the randomizer, so they're setting up the fact that the randomizer is still integrated into the TARDIS so that they can use that as a MacGuffin towards the end. I think if they hadn't decided that they were going to get rid of that, it probably wouldn't have been mentioned.
No one would have noticed.
You're probably right. Probably.
Because I didn't. Oh, no. Okay, anyway, let's continue.
I'd like to bring up something that really shocked me was the transition shot from the beach.
Yeah, that zoom out.
Yeah, and it's the background of the new opening title sequence. And then we have that pinhole effect with the lens. And then when that happened, and it continues in that way for the rest of the series, this is the most drastic change to how the show is shot that I can remember. It is completely different the way that scenes are shot. So many uptight close-ups, so many different angles, so much obstruction. It's trying to give, and I don't want to sound like a snob here, it's trying to give a bit of a more of a cinema verite, as they say, than what we were used to before, which was your standard stage blocking that you would see literally on theater stages. This is people are close to each other. People are blocking each other. The camera's got an obstruction in front of it a little bit while looking at someone else. It's so much going on, and it makes the show, for the first time direction-wise, feel a lot more similar to the show now than how the show was before this time.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that here is down to Lovett Bickford and the way he directed the show.
Right. It was very striking, and I enjoyed that change. I will miss how it was done before, but it's just so interesting to see the beginnings of this here.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the Leisure Hive itself. So we've had that set up. We get to Argolis. We see the Argolins. I think they look great.
I love them.
I love them.
Friend of the podcast, Rob Alsop, who does a lot of costume and design work and has worked on the modern show, used an original Argolin costume as a cosplay at DragonCon a few years ago. It was really cool.
That's so cool. It was one of the first things when they first showed the Argolins. I was like, oh, whoever did the draping here is a professional. All of the costumes, the beading, everything was so beautiful on the Argolins.
The costumer and the designer did good here.
You know what I enjoyed? So as we get introduced to them, we see snippets of the Foamasi, right? Am I saying that right? Foamasi. And I loved that. The filming of that was wonderful until we got the full shot.
Right. It's one of those
yeah.
things where you're thinking, oh, this is done to build tension. Yes, it's done to build tension, also to hide the costumes for as long as possible.
And that's done really, really well at the end of episode 3 as well. So we'll talk about that when we get there.
Okay, musical break. That's too long because there are musical breaks that are too long.
Oh, the shots of the outside of the hive?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that, but then when the shuttle from Earth is arriving.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. It's just, you barely see it move. And you're like, are we going to hold here for, yeah, okay, 15, 20 seconds later, we finally dock. I'm like, really?
Mm-hmm.
We got to stretch this out, guys.
Yeah, all of the docking shots.
It was done a second time.
It's a bit reminiscent of Star Trek, The Motionless Picture. I do like the music, though. There's that musical cue that comes up a lot that sounds very clearly like it's based on Holst's Mars, and I think that's really effective.
I kept thinking of Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Hearing the song from this just really popped into my head. But I enjoyed it. I know that there was discussion in the mail about how I was very concerned about Dutters going back into synth. But if the synth sounds like this, I'm okay with it. This is actually pretty good. I guess Dutters does better not using synth is the thing.
Yeah, no one's let their cat just wander across the synth.
No, there's something going on here.
I noticed the most random of things. What was the deal with the statues? And at some point, who decided that we should make clear and pink statues of the Argolins that can then be used as props for the Doctor to play with?
Yeah, they looked like those really like cheap store mannequins where they're like hollow on one side and will break easy. And I just couldn't ride with the amount of plastics being used in the whole thing either. There was so much electricity conducing plastic that I couldn't get over.
I was just impressed that it still had like the hairstyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, they took the time and effort to make this. And I'm very curious as to who made that decision to make that happen.
Yeah, there's a big Argolin mold somewhere.
So I did have to headcanon it a little bit. And my assumption is that those mannequins were something that they needed to do all of the trickery on the tachyonic generator. I don't know. If you have to headcanon it, it's probably not great. But that's the only thing I could come up with.
But it was wonderful when Romano was pulling it along and, he wasn't actually on the end of his scarf.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty great.
So I think this episode does quite a good job at generally setting up the concept. We find out what happened to Argolis. We find out what is happening to the Argolins as they age and die as a legacy of the war. And we start getting glimpses of the Foamasi as well as this group that is trying to buy the hive. Brock shows up and he wants to sell the planet to the race that they were at war with. So I think the setup here is solid, but I don't say this very often, but it could have been stretched out in a better way. Needed better padding.
Agreed. Am I the only one that was taken aback during the scene with Brock and Cloud when they're trying to sell it and we have the reveal of the aging? Did anyone else just say, holy shit, did that guy just pop out a blueberry?
Yes. I hadn't realized they had the little berry cones on their head.
Yeah.
When he was just sitting there and then he keeled over and one just like popped right off. And I was like, what just fell off of him? I was like, did they just not cut? Like, is his costume falling apart? Uh-oh.
It raises a couple questions. Like, maybe it's the video game mentality in my mind, but can you defeat an Argolin by like staying above them and picking all their berries?
Wow, they should all stay away from Riley.
It looks like one of those things like, people get obsessive about bubble wrap. It's kind of like that, I think. I don't know. I like the design of them, but I feel like that was not necessary. Not
I
necessary.
mean, I definitely had the thought at the end, flash forwarding there for a second, when we have the rejuvenation happened. I wondered if she grew back her berries.
Right. Or maybe... Or maybe like when she was like dying, I was waiting for someone to say, quick, hurry up, let's put the berries back on her. That'll fix her, right? I don't know.
Oh, no.
Can you eat these berries? Like, do they provide like health potions?
I think that's what the Foamasi were all about. I think that's what the war is about.
They're farming Argolins.
Yes.
Oh, no. This has got way dark, way quick. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the new Watchers in the Fourth Dimension, now with 80% more darkness.
You're welcome.
Are we almost to part 2?
Yeah, I think we're at part 2.
So it's set up well. There's this human visitor, Loman, who goes into the generator for what should be a routine experiment, and he dies. His arms and head pop off. And that sets up the ending. The Doctor goes into the generator to examine the inner workings. A reptile, one of the Foamasi, manipulates the controls, and the Doctor starts to come apart on the view screen and screams. And that's our cliffhanger, and we're into part 2.
It's a pretty good cliffhanger, to be quite honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they basically repeat it for
Yeah.
part 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it.
And recaps are getting a little long here. You guessed correctly that would get mentioned. And immediately after the recap is when we get another sequence of the shuttle arriving. So yes, back to back here. Why?
Yeah.
But it's fine.
At this point, I'm left wondering, how often are these shuttles coming? Are they coming to Argolis every 20 minutes? Or is this story's perception of time really, totally, and utterly fucked?
Yes.
Because, Moritz dies and we get Mina showing up to be his replacement, and then she starts dying pretty quickly. And yet...
Wait. She starts dying. Oh, you mean she starts dying quickly. The time it takes her to die is not quick.
I mean, it takes a lot, but...
She mentioned herself that it was coming on quicker than she expected. So
Right.
they did
talk
it away a little bit.
But it's like they're talking on the viewer to Brock, who's on Earth, and then he shows up on the next shuttle.
5 seconds later, they hang up the Zoom and he shows up.
Yeah.
Well, remember, it wasn't really Brock.
Of course, but no one questions that it's not really Brock. And then we get another shuttle with Mina 5 minutes later in viewing time, and now we've got another shuttle 5 minutes later with Hardin. I'm not sure on the pace that this story's supposed to be happening at. And I'm not sure how long the Doctor and Romana are meant to be on Argolis. My perception of time here is just ruined.
Well, they also had a 20-minute war, so...
I love that, though. I love that. That is such a classic sci-fi, send the audience with fear kind of move. In the future, we're so deadly that horrible wars can be taking place in just 20 minutes. I like that a lot.
But that's also what's building up in the world around when this is going out is
Cold War
the Cold
time.
War is,
Yeah.
And over here in America, we're hiding under desks because we think that's going to help. But, their fear is that it's going to be a 20-minute thing and the whole world will explode.
You read my mind, Diana.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on to your berries.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I had the whole feeling like throughout this that the entirety of the episode took place over about 4 hours.
That was my feeling, too. I will say this. When we have proper scenes, a lot happens and it moves quickly. It's just, you're right, the filler is the problem.
So the shuttles probably are coming and going every 20-odd minutes. Because it's also mentioned that with all of the incidents happening on the Hive, all of the tourists leave and flee. So, yeah, they have to be pretty regular.
I want to talk about some other things. The music. There are definitely some really good gems in here with the music. And I think so Mina is describing the Hive, and the music does this really hopeful thing in the background, if that makes sense to any of you. And I thought that was really nice and lovely. And then in part 4, there's some more that is not hopeful, but more military-esque. But we'll get there.
Yeah. And to your point, Julie, I think that hopeful theme comes as Mina is talking about the whole purpose of the Hive being to promote understanding between all races. That's fairly idealistic on a planet that's been absolutely devastated by a nuclear war and from a race that's dying. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that some of the reasons why they're like messing with time, because when you first think about messing with time, it's inherently a bad thing. But with them dying so quickly, you're like, well, I understand why they're actually doing it. And it's actually a heartbreaking concept, because even if they can reverse some of the time, the fact that they're infertile, I don't know how much it's going to do for them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as part of that, we meet Hardin, who's doing the time experiments, and his financial backer, Stimson, who's a fucking sleazebag.
Absolutely.
And he went skulking around those halls, and I thought, I won't be mad if he's dead. And then 5 minutes later, he was dead. And I was like, yes, called it.
That's actually really freaky, because when he stumbles into Brock's room, whose room is inexplicably incredibly green in its light,
I wonder why.
and the other guy's skin is in the closet, that is kind of horrific.
Well, I had this moment where I'm going to actually go back and watch the episodes from New Who to wonder if there's not some connection to the Slovene, because there's just like a lot that's similar about the two species.
Yeah.
Compression into skin suits.
Being kind of lizardy.
Reptile-y organisms. But yeah, I saw the skin suit and I was like, oh my God, are they Slovene?
And then he runs around, gets his glasses knocked off. And so obviously I can't sleep without my glasses. Enters the mind. And yeah, I enjoyed all of that. I did have a question though. So when I was listening to the generator, right, the voice that comes back through it, it sounds like a Cyberman.
A little bit, yeah.
It's like a very similar thing that they're doing to modulate the voice. So
see, I just thought someone had stolen Peter Frampton's talk box.
I mean, also wonderful.
I do love where this leads to, which is the Doctor's scarf being attached to Stimson's body. And it has that wonderful line of, his scarf killed Stimson. Well, arrest the scarf then. For something that's had a lot of the overt humor and the ridiculousness we saw last season stripped out, those little moments of humor actually work really well.
I thought the Tom Baker gags in this story were well done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because they were restrained.
Yeah, the little sit gag in the courtroom made me giggle a lot.
Yeah, he's actually a lot better with subtle humor than the ridiculousness that we were seeing last season.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We get a lot more setup here. We find out about the helmet of Theron and find that he's the leader who led them to war. It's there as a symbol of peace, but they keep it there to remind them of what they have become. And Pangle, who we haven't actually talked about yet, kind of idolizes Theron.
Well, at the beginning, it's not 100% clear how much he's going to get involved. Part 3 is when you're like, oh, this guy. Like, absolutely this guy.
He is very well played by David Haig.
Yeah.
He's
so good.
Also beautiful. Like,
oh, man.
He's just beautiful.
You're not kidding.
David Haig, candidly, is far too good for Doctor Who. And he goes on to do much bigger and better things after this.
What was really great about his performance is that we so often antagonist right off the bat, or a bad actor right off the bat. I did not see it coming at all with him, especially with how he so politely puts on that exhibition about the generator in front of the tourists. Just his whole attitude, his demeanor is just very well hidden until it comes out in part 3.
Yeah.
And it was very well done by him.
Part 3, where he turns out to be kind of racist.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, I wrote down that usually burying the lead is not a compliment, but in this case, they buried the lead quite well, where I never felt truly surprised, but I was still pleasantly interested in the fact that they kept him quiet for so long.
See, this is where I'm so envious of you all, because I've seen this so many times. I think I got this one on VHS when I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. I don't get any of that. I knew what was coming and I knew who was behind it all along. So I'm a little envious that you guys got to experience that and didn't expect him to be the bad guy of the story. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was quite enjoyable. I could see him maybe getting up to that level of the distrustful character, but still with our heroes. But I didn't expect the full villain turn.
Love that. All right, so as we're heading towards the end of part 2, they're experimenting with time, and it's suggested that the Doctor becomes the candidate for the experiment. And as part of him being a prisoner, he's willing, given his age, and it should only knock off 10 to 12 years. And when he comes out, he is aged significantly. That's our cliffhanger, and we're into part 3. with Sorry Julie, another long reprise.
When it gets close to the 2-minute mark, we're going to have some problems.
It's funny to me how the Doctor looks when he comes out. Just, I can't figure out if he looks like an ancient Greek or he looks like Moses when he comes out.
Yes,
Moses.
he sure does. Yes, he looks like Moses. I was trying to place that too.
But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much. And they did, I think, a bang-up job on the old age makeup, which obviously was very important to the entire serial, is to be able to pull that off well. And they did.
Hair and makeup on point.
Yeah.
On point.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Which is also adding to the point that I made earlier, is that it really had to be, not just because of the plot, but also of the new shooting style. So many uptight shots on people's faces. It's really would have shown all manner of makeup sins.
Although everyone was watching this on, I don't know, 15, 14-inch TV at the time. So
Right.
not quite in the glorious HD on a whatever size you have at home, 50-inch plus TV that we have today. One thing I think is really interesting, and for our regular listeners, take a shot, because Sandiford talks about
Oh, there it is.
Tom Baker and those two cliffhangers specifically. So all through season 17, Tom was the big ego. He was untouchable. He was off doing his own ridiculous thing. If they'd let him had a talking cabbage, he would have been very happy. But here we see him, firstly, dismembered and then aged. So he is very clearly being signposted as vulnerable, which is not something the Fourth Doctor's been in a long, long time. So there is a significant change, not just in the visual style, but also the way the Doctor's being presented. And I just think that's really cool and really interesting.
It goes to the point of how we're saying that he's more restrained. I know that it was a very serious moment when the Doctor is aged, but when he's aged, he plays it like the Doctor has an actual fear about what happened to him. Instead of, I could have imagined him, if this happened last season, he would have just been, okay, I'm the kooky old guy. But he doesn't do that. He seems so more just grounded, and it just works so much better. And it still allows him to make a few quips, but still retains like a level of seriousness about what's happened to him.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my favorite moments of the whole story was when the Doctor was about to climb into that chamber, and you can tell that he doesn't want to be doing this. And it was this really quiet read of the line where I was like, hey, this is not an over exuberant Doctor. This is a Doctor that is fearful. Time Lords aren't totally immune to everything in the world. Like, they should be afraid of things. It makes them more interesting to watch. And so for the Doctor to have that fear of like, what if it's not just going to take 10 to 12 years off my life?
You mean what happens if the Time Lords aren't just dicks?
Yeah, you know?
I have to throw that in there whenever possible. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
But it's true.
I'll give you that opportunity every time.
I really have enjoyed this one a lot. I'm really hoping that we buck a trend in fandom, because I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I'm going to go ahead and lay that on the table.
I'll tell you now, I think the perception of fandom on this story is that it's just kind of mid.
Oh, wow.
It's not terrible. It's not brilliant. I think that's the fan perception.
I want to talk about something we haven't really touched on. The relationship between Hardin and Mina.
Oh, they're fucking.
But
You know what? I don't think they are.
I don't think they are.
No.
But he is in love with her.
Oh, he's, yes.
Yeah, I say that flippantly. No, I don't think they are either, but you're right. He is in love with her.
I am always a big fan of that type of character. We meet him and he's mixed up and a fraud. He seems to be just cowardly, but then he rises to the occasion. I am a big fan of that. I really like that and was glad to see it.
Yeah, he was my favorite little guy in the whole thing. He was so cute.
Loved the little moments that they had together when they would just talk about random things to a certain degree. And I just thought that was lovely. And I liked when they were having the conversation and she was like, she wanted to die with grace. I just think that's wonderful.
And there are moments where you really see that between them, where she talks about how the distance between them grows when she's named as chairman. And then later, as he's helping her around the room, she talks about how the distance is shortened again. So you really see that, and it's commented on. Yeah, it's really nice and it's really well done.
It was so sweet. I really loved it.
Well, as we're getting towards the end of part 3, I think the next big thing to talk about is the full reveal of the Foamasi.
So I love that we have a friendly one.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love some of the lines we get, such as when he's chirping away at the doctor and Hardin and Romana butt in and the doctor says, "Don't interrupt, he's a Foamasi." I don't know why, I just really like that line.
I love the fact that not only is it friendly, but it's very respectful and just really nice, considerate, and all these other things. And so between not having any interaction with them up until this point, other than seeing the close-up shots, you don't know anything about them. And you think that if they had been in a war and most of the Argolins seem very, very nice, you would think that their enemy would be a dangerous character, and they're not. And I just think that it's just brilliantly portrayed.
That's a really good point you made there, because as we were joking earlier about how they were hidden throughout the first two parts of the serial, it isn't just because for tension. It isn't just because the costumes didn't look great. But I think you have a point there. It's because we are all thinking reptiles, non-mammalian, they bomb the hell out of these people. These are going to be very villainous. They're going to be, they're going to skulk around. They're going to hiss a lot. No, they're actually, when you see them up close and you hear how they speak, they're actually kind of cute. They're almost a Muppet-like creature. And so it's just a really nice twist on that. I like that a lot. And I will say, despite all the criticism of the costume, I did notice that their eyes, while on a full wide shot, did move independently. So that was a good touch.
They sure
I was
did,
impressed with that.
Yeah, that was really, really cool. I like that too. So were any of you expecting Brock and co to actually be Foamasi?
No.
Oh, I did, yeah.
Great reveal. We're getting all the highs off of this, Anthony. I'm sorry. I wish I could bottle this up and give it to you.
Love that.
I definitely kind of saw it coming, only because of the very quick hang up on Zoom and Brock showing up. I was like, this is weird, but took it as one of those time things that I'm not quite catching on to because it's a TV show. But the second I saw their Slovene skin, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, let's go.
I did know from the very beginning they were not on the level, because in their introduction part 1, there's a shot where the camera just focuses on Clout and he gives this small little grin, which was so wonderfully creepy and off-putting. So obviously I knew there was something going on there, but I did not expect that.
The direction on this is off the chain.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's what they had to do, like the super up-close shots. It's hard to do a reveal like that. The Scooby-Doo mask reveal, that's all you had to do. But I thought it was well executed. Yeah. And also so many cuts. They did it the best way they could, and it actually worked okay.
Yeah, I was anticipating the two humans being Foamasi, but I wasn't anticipating the secret agent, head of government Foamasi that showed up, James bonding his way around. That was where I thought it was really clever, because you had all of the hand creepy shots until we find out that this whole reveal is happening. And so it leads into that idea that whoever these scaly things are bad, because that's when they're out of their skin suits and trying to kill everybody. But there are definitely some shots where it's a passive observer in the hallways. And so it was a nice throw off to think that there's only one set of reptilians around. And in reality, there's a whole subplot happening.
Yeah, two factions of the same race. Well, that takes us into part 4.
Well, I wanted to talk one thing about part 3, because towards the end, we do get Pangle going a little crazy and giving a speech that he gives at the very end. The speech is a little bit crazy, but the music, military march thing that's happening in the background, perfection.
And I really think that is meant to evoke Holst and Mars.
Yeah.
And that's really good. I really love that.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because from that point of him trying to get that speech all the way through, I feel like the serial is just him desperately wanting to have this big dramatic speech, and it keeps getting interrupted.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
Guys, let me have my moment.
Basically, yeah, exactly.
And I think that's an area of where the dialed down humor is so much more effective when it does actually happen. All right, so part 4.
I love the way that what do they call them? The West Lodge?
The West Lodge.
The West Lodge are wrapped up, like literally just throws this object and then they're all kind of bundled for shipping. It looks like it'd be very comfortable, like a airline blanket for them to head back. But I really enjoyed that. I thought that was really funny and a good way of showing some way of restraining. How do you restrain a person in that costume? I don't know. Other than that, right?
I legitimately thought he had thrown a Pokeball. I was almost disappointed to see them all wrapped up. I was like, oh my God. Yes.
Oh boy.
Foamasi, I choose you.
Foamasi used nuclear war.
Critical hit.
Also, do we love that Pangle starts using Wii before any of the rest of his clones are created?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
He was so excited.
It's wild, that moment that he reveals that, and I think it was in part 3, that Mina was not his mother and that he is actually the child of the generator.
Child of the generator.
Talk about a twist I was not ready for. I was not ready for the whole group to be involved. I thought that this, clearly Pangle was going around doing his crazy Pangle roam is the best shit. And then all of a sudden Mina is like, no, don't tell them. And I'm like, no, Mina, not you too. Not you, Mina.
Although, to be fair, it does seem like I think Mina realizes she made some missteps along the way, right? Especially when we get to the very, very end, which I have some commentary on, but we'll get there. But it is crushing to her, I think, because she's just like, we experimented some. We wanted to let one move forward, see how things were going. And he turned out to be a bit crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a little sad.
Just a bit.
Just a bit.
Just a bit.
Can't always win with your created children.
One berry short of a bushel. I'm going to keep hitting that button.
That's the best one so far.
Oh, boy. And when he does get to do his big speech, he just goes with it, even though it is interrupted by Romana. He still said, hell with it, I'm going to do it. I love that. It's like he found the Control-C, Control-V keys. And it's just like bang, 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 bang. Let's go.
They were all showing up on that screen, and I had a moment of are they all in the box together? Because they never gave me the thought that the box is bigger on the inside. So, are they all just manifesting one by one and squishing?
Eventually, the doors open, so.
And then they all come out the party's been in the TARDIS. But are they,
That's fair.
Yeah.
I do have one problem, though, about this plot. It was already mentioned that the hive is small. There isn't a lot of place to grow. And now this jackass is just cloning himself over and over again. These clones need places to sleep, right? I mean, they need to eat something, right? They're organic. They need to...
Aren't they eating berries?
Oh, God. Are they eating their own berries?
Oh, no.
God.
Is that cannibalism?
I guess. My feeling is that Pangle's just gone crazy, and he's when they're done with him, he just throws them out the window and just keeps making more whenever he needs them.
It's only going to be a couple of minutes before Pangle starts talking about Lebensraum. Certainly ranty enough.
Yeah.
I do love the fact that, obviously, knowing that the doctor went in there, I at first thought the doctor was just going to escape through the back, because he was like, oh yeah, by the way, created a back door. But the making it be that he is part of that army, I thought was very fun.
Yes.
I love that.
We missed why, and he had to go in to fit the randomizer because science or something.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't quite follow, but sure, it sounded good. And yes, I do love that he is the army. Pangle on the outside and the doctor on the in.
It's so bizarre. And then Hardin only cares about Mina, and he's like,
Yeah.
I must go to her. And I love it.
He
so
takes
much.
out
It
one
was
of
so
the Argolin
nice.
to get her. That little grab at the back of the neck, and he's unexpected badass.
Oh, yeah, right? Just comes through at the end.
Gotta love it.
And I have comments on how Mina treats that.
Oh, yeah?
So, okay, we get to the point where she gets taken in there. We do the whole de-aging, I guess, type thing going on. And then she runs out, has the baby in her arms, and leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, what about Hardin? I need to have this reconnecting moment with Mina and Hardin, and we just leave that open?
There's a lot that's left open. I mean, what even happens to the Argolin after this? They're still sterile.
Mm-hmm.
The generator's damaged. Can the rest of them even de-age? Probably not. They're still effectively a doomed race.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Still quite dark.
A lot is left to be decided. I don't know about you guys, but when we got to the climactic ending and Pangol and Mina are both put into the generator, and then I saw that effect of their faces coming together, I was like, oh shit, we've got a fly situation here. This is going to be full Cronenberg Goldblum fly situation, and this is going to be crazy. But no, we don't. We have him turn into a baby, which I guess is a cute and nice way of solving that problem. And I have a question. Is it a playful bit there about him saying, have a baby, as in have a jelly baby?
Oh, maybe.
Ooh.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's immediately what I thought of.
There is one other line I really need to give a shout out to, and that's when they're talking about contacting the Foamasi, and he walks in and says, "You mentioned Foamasi?" I don't know why. That line is just so utterly iconic and brilliant.
Also, there is absolutely zero reason why this guy is still alive, because how did they escape their wrapping?
He said when they were wrapped that it would hold until they got them to the ship. So they probably got pushed into the ship first, it came off, and there was a little bit of a struggle. I think it is just about there in the script.
Right. This is one of those things where, man, this ending, they don't waste any time. It's just bing, bang, boom. All right, everyone in turns, let's go.
One other little bit of dialogue that I do want to talk about is when we finally get the real Doctor, as all the fake ones are disappearing. The Doctor makes an unexpected accounting reference. He says that it's FIFO, first in, first out. So he was the first one in, he was the first one. I was like, was that an accounting reference? What the hell?
That's so funny. Difference in life experiences. You also use that in restaurants. and I was like, I mean, yeah, first in, first out. That's how you serve your food.
Checks out.
Yeah.
The other bit of dialogue that I really, really like is as they are sneaking off, they're leaving the randomizer behind, and the Doctor brushes off the threat of the Black Guardian, describing him as a galactic hobo with ideas beyond his station. The universe is full of them. I love that line.
Such a nice self-referential line.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then the TARDIS dematerializes, and that's the end of the story. So before we rate this one, the usual metrics. There were no quarries in this one. There were no jelly babies. I didn't catch any I'll explain laters. Anyone else?
No.
Nope.
All right, the biggie, camp count points. Does this deserve any?
I don't think so. I feel like it would be a reach.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Wow, this is the first one to get no camp count points since season 15.
Wow.
Yeah, well.
All right, we will go ahead and score this. And Riley, you get to go first.
All right. What a change. Wow. Night and day difference. Now I understand why all the people that mailed in on our season 17 retrospective were kind of teasing at this massive change, and this is it. And what can I say? I'm very happy with this change. Am I happy with all of it? No, not necessarily. I think what struck me the most was the restraint on Tom Baker. I didn't get a chance to mention it, but I think this was my favorite performance by Lala Ward so far. And I can definitely see an improvement there. I think she seems a bit more calm, like she's not like forcing too much. And I also think that the writing is doing her a lot more favors than previously. I enjoy the conciseness of the script. It needed to be edited better for story. I thought the editing for shots was good. I enjoyed the change in music. I'm excited to see what we have coming in front of us, because for the first time in a long time, I have no idea what we're going to get. So I'm really happy. This is a very optimistic beginning for a season for me. So I'm going to give it 8 popped out blueberries out of 10.
All right, I'm up next. And I think generally I'm in agreement with Riley. This story basically signifies as big a change as you can have in the direction of the show without replacing the Doctor and his companion. We've got a very new visual aesthetic. We've got very, very different direction. The music has completely changed. And it really works very, very well. And yes, this story does run a little bit short, but you can kind of tell this is kind of the first step. They're making use of a writer who was far more well acquainted with the old style, and they've had to do some things to make this script work. I'm fine with that. On Riley's note about Lala Ward being fantastic, that righteous indignation when Pangol wants to blow up the Foamasi ship and she yells, "That is an act of war." She was so good in that moment. And yes, I think she's really settling into the part a lot better, this story. So like Riley, I'm excited for where we're going. I think this is a really, really good step. And I'm also going to give it 8 phallic helmets out of 10. Diana, you're up next.
I can only reiterate what y'all have already said, considering that we didn't really talk about Ward at all during this episode. I was pleasantly surprised with her, since I don't have any kind of a memory of like super loving her as Romana, but this was an absolutely solid showing for her. My big critique that we also did not talk about was that I hate the Doctor's new outfit. I'm a scarf diehard. I have my own. I wear it every chance that I get in the one day it's cold in Texas. I love it to pieces, and it's the piece in my wardrobe I get the most compliments on. So I have to take off a full point for that because I'm a diehard for the scarf. But other than that, this was a great episode to start this new journey on, because it was fun. It was quick paced enough that I was, really into it the whole time. The costuming was beautiful. The contouring on the Argolins was lovely, which is difficult in green. Yeah, I had a great time the whole time. So I am also giving it 8 berry compotes out of 10.
Okay, Julie, wrap it up.
All right. I think it's safe to say that I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was such a great way of giving it new direction, but still having a feel of what Doctor Who is. And I'm going to be a little bit nicer. I'm not going to go through a whole spiel because we all said a bunch of things. So I'm going to give it 8.5 green beehive wigs out of 10.
Wow. Well, that gives us a story average of 8.13, which is the highest for a season opener we've had since season 13. Since the last season we did, where we were a 4-piece. There you go. It's been a while. Well, that brings us to the end of the episode. We will be back next time as we talk about a story that features the return of Jacqueline Hill, although sadly not as Barbara, in Meglos.
Yes!
But in the meantime, thank you everyone so very much for listening. And as always, have a good one. You have been listening to the all-new Watchers in the Fourth Dimension with Riley Schreck, Julie Philippek, myself Anthony Williams, and for the very first time as a regular, Diana Burney. This episode, one very short of a bushel, was recorded on Wednesday the 30th of October 2024. If this is your first time listening into the show, all of our previous episodes are available wherever you like to get your podcasts. You can interact with us on Facebook and Instagram at @Watchers4D, and you can also email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, please do subscribe and consider leaving us a review or rating on your favorite podcasting app. All of those things really do help the show. And always remember, if your world gets devastated by nuclear war, why not build a holiday resort on the remaining radioactive wastelands? What could possibly go wrong with that idea?